Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Edric Show. I am your host, Edric Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and ring that notification bell. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and you will receive notices when I post content each and every week. Very, very special show today. My guests are Dr. Adaira Landry and Dr. Resa Lewis. They are the authors of the new book, MicroSkills, Small Actions, Big Impact. The skills outlined in their book can make a difference in your professional and personal life. Dr. Landry is an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School and an emergency medicine physician at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. And Dr. Lewis is professor of emergency medicine at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, as well as the host of the Visible Voices podcast. Let me welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's amazing to be here.
My pleasure. Let's get right into it. Very interesting book. So first of all, tell me about the book. Specifically, can you elaborate on the term micro skills? How do they differ from traditional skills or competencies one might have?
I'll start.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So MicroSkills, we think, sounds exactly as you may imagine. It is a small fundamental building block, a step towards a larger skill, a larger goal. And when we think about the workplace, often many of us are overwhelmed or paralyzed by a large task, a goal, maybe even a habit that we'd like to incorporate into our professional life. We think we would like the reader to adopt this mindset that everything can be broken down into these small steps. And they are additive and they translate. So once you learn the small steps to achieve a larger skill, for example, polished communication would be a large skill. And a small example of that would be email, compassionate email. Some of the skills that you learn for email can then be translated to other skills that we talk about in the book.
And Dr. Landry, did you have want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think we wrote this book because both of us have a journey early in our careers where we felt like there was a bigger goal that we had. For me, it was you're trying to get promoted, trying to build a brand, trying to become an expert. And I remember asking a colleague of mine, how is it that you're always able to get all of these opportunities? Like what is it that you're doing? How do you find all these people to nominate you and to sponsor you? And he stopped me and he said, Adaira, actually, I'm doing all of this work on my own. No one is coming to me offering this stuff. In fact, I'm going to them. And the first micro skill, it wasn't called a micro skill at the time, but the first thing that he taught me was that he was writing his own letters of recommendation. And at the time, I had no idea that that was even something that people were doing in the workplace. I just assumed, if you ask someone to nominate you, the reason why most of us are afraid is because they have to write this letter of recommendation and we're burdening them and those sorts of things. Well, he did it himself. He would write his own letters, like the first draft. And that was just new to me. And it really showed me that there is this playbook or guidebook or handbook that some people have access to that allows them to really unlock the code to success. And some of us just don't have access to. And so when we wrote this book, we were always thinking about the secrets to success. Like, what is it that makes some people just do really, really well? And what can we share to others who are just wondering, why am I being left behind?
That's a very interesting point because it's almost it's going down the road of self-awareness, of understanding what the skills you don't have. And so my question then is, if someone is interested in learning about micro skills or training or getting, how to be better with their micro skills, one, is there an assessment or a competency? How can someone determine their level of micro skills that they have? And then two, what are some of the ways that they can identify specific areas of improvement that they might need?
This is a wonderful question. And what I'll say is when Adaira and I were trying to figure out what are we going to put in this book, what is going to comprise the content, We did a deep dive into the business self-help literature, like all sorts of books. And there's a bit of a consensus regarding the content that's covered. In fact, people say, well, how is your book different? I have so many of these types of books in my pile. And what we know is not only did we do that broad assessment, we went deeper by having a lot of beta readers and a lot of input. And we surveyed people, all different ages, stages, backgrounds, industries, to get input on what they thought was important, what they want to read about, what they have found important in their workplace. And unsurprisingly, a lot of this translated and was the same as what we found in healthcare. When Adaira and I first started writing, our proof of concept was articles. So one example is what she shared about the letter of writing your own letter of recommendation. Another is a compassionate email culture. And we found that these articles resonated broadly with many audiences, many industries. To your point about, taking a test or assessing your MicroSkills, this book is comprehensive, and we would never say that this is every single thing. But by exposing people to these MicroSkills, it actually, we hope, exposes gaps for people of where they do need to learn, where they do need to go deeper. And sometimes you have that awareness, sometimes you don't. But in the book, we talk about one way to get that awareness, and that's by surrounding yourself with your people. In other words, your personal board of directors, which we didn't come up with that term, and we love that term. These are your trusted people that sit at your figurative table, not your literal table, and they support you, they trust you, you trust them, and they help you get where you want to professionally.
I think the other thing that I would add that we did that was very intentional, and it was Resa's idea, is that we made the table of contents as detailed as we possibly could, so that this book isn't really like you don't read it like a novel where you just have to like read it from cover to cover and then you'll stumble upon some information. We wanted it to be very discoverable, and so we fractured the book into 10 different chapters, and within each chapter there's multiple different segments, so that it's easily able to be read and digested, not necessarily cover to cover, but need by need. And so you can open up the table of contents and say, I really want to work on my email habits, and go straight to that page, versus like having to, explore through like large paragraphs and pages of case studies to finally find the message.
If for people who may, like say, want to start assessing and learning and training and getting their MicroSkills up to speed, if this is possible, maybe you can let me know. But if there were a couple, maybe one or two critical MicroSkills that you guys said or feel are maybe not the most important, but fairly important, which of those MicroSkills would you guys say folks should probably, I don't even want to say start out with, but maybe what are two critical ones that people can use right away?
We get this question a lot, and it's a good one because I think it really just like brings like what we feel like is the most urgent to the surface. It totally depends on the person and where they are in life. I'll speak for my own self and say pausing before accepting an opportunity has been fundamentally important for my development over the last few years. And so I used to subscribe to this idea of saying yes to everything. I mean, it was taught to me when I first started medical school, residency, maybe even college. I don't know, but I've known it. I've heard it for so many years, like say yes to everything because you never know what's going to be like the opportunity that's the big, hit for you. And so driven a lot by fear of missing out, I would say yes to pretty much anything that came my way. I just felt so ashamed or embarrassed, or I don't know, saying no. But it got me to the point where I was like overwhelmed. I had too much on my plate. And I wouldn't say that I'm like perfect at it. Like these moments still happen, but way less frequently, where I'm able to screen opportunities up front now. And that helps me, sort of shield off things from even landing on my plate to begin with. And so a lot of it really is thinking about the actual opportunity. Am I the best fit for this? Do I have the time? Is there funding? What does my calendar look like next week? Like just really trying to understand the opportunity before you just impulsively say yes, or say yes out of fear, just taking the moment to pause and assess, like, is this something that I should really be considering, or should I pass?
I'll add that Adaira really has highlighted this phrase, which is a magnificent, beautiful, fantastic phrase. When people offer that opportunity, rather than saying yes, rather than saying no, she has suggested, and I love this, tell me more, tell me more. That actually builds in a pause. And the reason I bring that up is in the book, and what designates, we think, this book from other books in the pile is we actually give illustrations, we give examples of literally what you can say, because many of these books tell people to go out and do something, but they don't break down the how. And as we share, there are 10 chapters. Each chapter has microskills. Every microskill is illustrated with a story. These are real stories that have happened to Adaira or to myself. Then we share with the reader why we actually think they should consider integrating this skill. We acknowledge this is hard, we get it, and we actually call out the why it might be hard, and then are the how-tos, or what we call critical actions. I really like, I mean, we of course think all the skills are important, and I tend to go towards the same one, and a part of me wants to like bring up something different. I'll say there are 2 chapters, and then I'll just highlight one. One is our chapter 1, which is microskills for self-care. Another one that I think is really important because people are maybe slow to realize they have this, which is microskills for building your network. So I'll bring up the self-care and go deeper into that because people are surprised that we started our book with that. The reason is, and this is not just medicine, although medicine is really, really guilty of this, we're not taught to prioritize the self and taking care of ourselves, self-care. We really believe that everything starts with the self. And the more you're able to make sure you're good with yourself, meaning your physical health, your mental health, your financial health, building that board of directors, having a way that you want to navigate meetings, and really in a healthy way, putting everything on a calendar so you're organized. That's a little sneak preview of what's in that chapter on self-care. While you're really working on you, of course, you're going to be doing your work and working with a team, but everything starts with the self. And the better you are with yourself, the better you are with taking care of your team members and ultimately delivering a really high yield work product.
I want to circle back to communication because you mentioned email at the very beginning. I know you guys write quite a bit about microskills and improving in email communication. What I'm finding, though, is that particularly with younger people, emails and voicemails are not quite the preferred method of communication. They are communicating by text, social media messaging, that kind of thing. So given that some of the norms have changed or are changing around business communication, what are some of the micro skills that are critical to these new forms of communications? Because I think, the younger generation, I have a daughter who's 19 and, email is just not something on their radar. What are some of the ways that folks can maybe improve in how they communicate alternatively?
We actually, Resa and I started by using more asynchronous means to communicate, even when writing this book. So for this book, more so in the first half, I would say, of the journey, we were using audio text to communicate. It was just easier than having meetings all the time. And so we would, send reflections or ideas or feedback on the writing with just like holding our cell phone in front of our face and pressing send. And then when it was convenient to her, she would listen and then respond. And so part of it was like, wow, this would have been very helpful for me if like my boss did this 5 years ago, because like it avoids a lot of meetings and emails, and it's a lot more convenient, I would say. We also have done a lot of texting as well. And so I think there is this flexibility that, true leaders will have as they're coming up with a new generation, where you have to have some degree of flexibility. In the book, we talk about a time and place for everything, right? Like even with these additional resources like email, audio text, Slack, social media, a message can't necessarily resonate the same way if they're told in all those different avenues. And so we have like a chart where it's like, if you're going to deliver this message, this might be the best medium. This message, this might be the best medium, because it's not all equal. And then we also talk about setting up boundaries, especially when it comes to like mentoring relationships, or where there's like a a hierarchy or chain of command, just like how you want to be reached, how you want them to reach out to you, all those sorts of details. Having that conversation up front is quite helpful.
This overlaps a lot with a chapter that we have on learning your workplace culture. And I agree with everything Adaira just shared. And I have a specific story that I write in the book about I was leading a project. It was a book, actually, and we were getting the final details to finish everything up. And we had one chapter author. The missing piece was just one more item. And my co-editor and I were running the list, and we were literally real time kind of communicating with all the authors where there were a few dangling pieces to finish. And I didn't think anything of it. It was daytime, business hours. I sent a text, very kind, very much, hi, any idea when you can get this last piece to us? And this author really felt it was just basically infringed on sort of, I think, personal space, and actually felt that I was acting bullying. And I was very surprised, and I felt horrible because that was never my intent. And it turns out that there wasn't an emergency on their end about why it was. And again, it was an inquiry, but it really, in a good way, I considered it positive feedback. Like, okay, texting is not, what everybody would want in terms of running the list of work items. As Adaira, it's hard to know, and there's no absolute rules, but we have definitely noticed what you shared regarding younger generations and what the norms of communication are.
Both of you come from the world of academia and healthcare, primarily in emergency medicine services, which is very high pressure. And I was applauding you before we came on because anyone who can navigate in the world of emergency medicine, there are sacrifices to your time, and it's just busy, busy, busy. So I applaud both of you for coming and working in that field. But having said that, as emergency room physicians, and those high pressure situations on a regular basis, how have microskills help you guys navigate those challenges professionally?
I think our first micro skill is nourish relationships with people you trust. A lot of what we do in the emergency department really requires us to trust our team, our staff, and for them to also trust us as leaders of the team. And so I think the biggest thing that we emphasize in this book is the value of the people around you, whether it be your clinical team who's helping you get all of the supplies that you need, or it be in an office and you need people to debrief with, or collaborate with, whatever, something more productive in that workspace. Not doing things on your own, and really trying to have this collaborative feel and moving away from like I to we or I to us, that sort of mentality, I think is a really great step. So in the emergency room, I mean, I love to get to know people's names. I love to get to know who they are. They know me. They know that I have kids, and just like really trying to build that relationship is quite important.
I would say the old school of medicine and medical practice is there's no emphasis or prioritization or even modeling of how to make sure you eat, how to make sure you sleep, and how to call in sick when you're sick. And actually, Adaira and I wrote a piece about this, like 3 micro skills. I think the title of the piece was essentially "Burnout is not going away, but here are 3 micro skills you can work on." Because we really do think that amidst these industries, amidst these workplace cultures, there always is individual agency, even if you feel there may not be. And so as emergency physicians, often our shifts did not include time to eat. So if you didn't make that time or bring food, we've also written an article on healthy snacks to actually sustain your energy and not make you kind of go up and then crash. Sleep, anybody that deals with shift work knows the challenges of sleep, but there are sleep habits. We've also written about this, but also sleep truly is a part of health, and we believe that. And people who chronically are sleep deprived have higher rates of, for example, depression, obesity, diabetes, stress for cardiovascular disease, et cetera. So even simple things like making sure that you develop a healthy relationship to sleep. And finally, the calling in sick. I mean, we in the emergency department, you've probably seen this in your work. You don't call in sick. You don't admit when you don't feel well. In fact, you work while sick. And we have plenty of colleagues that have walked around working an emergency department shift with an IV in their arm because they are trying to get rid of their migraine headache, or perhaps they have morning sickness, or perhaps they had some bad food that isn't sitting well with them. And, COVID changed a lot for many people, many industries. We couldn't, if we were infected with COVID, call in sick. You had to stay at home. So most workplaces, the emergency department has a sick call policy. So we activate it in ways we never had before. And I think the reset is not going to overcorrect so that nobody calls in. I think now we think about that. And Adaira and I really talked about, well, how are we going to model that? How do you get people to actually call in sick? And so we talked about it being part of communication on a team, but also if you're the team leader, leading by example.
During your answers, it triggered another question in my head, which is micro skills for folks in your profession, from the physician side, the clinical side. But what about patients? What are maybe some micro skills patients may need or can use? Because, when you're in the emergency room and you want the communication, or you just want to know what's going on, and not to put you guys on the spot, but maybe there's opportunities for patients to learn micro skills as well.
I think one of the hardest parts for patients is understanding the culture of the hospital system. There is this mismatch expectation that often happens when people are less familiar with it. And it's their first time encountering, either a large academic center or a large rural center. I'm sorry, a small rural center. But just that lack of familiarity can be quite challenging. And so many times, I work in an academic center now, but many times patients come in and they might have a particular expectation of how quickly things are done, what all is done, how the information is communicated to them, and when the information is communicated to them. And so, not knowing that their doctors or nurses and PAs are busy doing other stuff that's also important. Sometimes patients can become frustrated from their perspective because it seems like nothing's happening. And so I think understanding the culture of the hospital system is a challenge for patients. And I don't blame them. It's not like anyone's teaching them this while they're in the waiting room. So sometimes they just don't know, and they learn it through example and experience, but that can be challenging for people for sure.
I'll bring up the personal board of directors because, that's just a good application for everybody in their lives. And so I do think when we get it, when people come to the emergency department, it's scary. It's very foreign environment for most people, and you don't know what's going to happen. So we're very acutely aware of that. So I think actually it's an opportunity for patients to bring or have personal board of director members on speed dial. And because your personal board can be someone that you call when you have some insurance questions. It could be making sure your primary care doctor, you have information, because we often need information about people's medical record or something like that. It could be, if someone has a caregiver who actually is the one that's with them day in and day out, maybe they can't come with them, but again, they're available for consultation or discussion by phone. Because we're very resourceful, and it's a bit like doing detective work or investigative journalism. When we're in the emergency department, we're trying to get as much information as possible from all different resources in a very time-limited period.
Let me shift now and ask you guys about your collaboration and your work together. How did your paths cross professionally, and how did you guys start collaborating on writing books and articles and things like that?
We started when I was a resident. I was interested in moving to Boston, and I mentioned it to a fellow colleague of mine that I'm thinking about applying to school, to programs in Boston, and they connected me with a few people. Resa was one of those. And we met initially once, and then we had another encounter overseas, actually, at a conference. And then there was a large gap when I was thinking about stepping down from a position. And we connected, and I got some advice from her about that. And we were talking about just what we're up to, projects we're working on. I was doing a lot of mentorship at the time. And Resa is a well-known mentor in our space. So as we ended the conversation, and Resa asked, if you ever want to write about this topic of mentorship, let me know. And it's a perfect example of like, I'm sure, Edric, you met someone and they said, oh, let me know if you ever want to X, grab coffee. I want to do this project together. And many times you might say, yeah, sure. And like, it never happens. But in this case, like that offering actually led to us writing multiple articles together and a book. And we've been on like 70 something podcasts together and this book tour. And so, it just sort of really shows you how, like, if someone does offer you something and you do your research, your tell me more version of that, and it seems like it's a great opportunity, like, yeah, take it and see where it goes.
It's also a great example of networking. And I often say that networking, it is a word, but it can sound a little not as warm and authentic as connecting. But, Adaira and I have a lot of geographic overlaps in terms of training and jobs, mostly in the Northeast, and also people because of emergency medicine. And we both have further training in ultrasound and in medical education. Adaira actually has a master's. And so we have a lot of people. And so this person that suggested to Adaira that she speak with me, then we spoke, then we met, and then it just grew, and the word is snowball. And it's just an amazing way to grow your network.
Well, I want to thank both of you for spending time with me today here on the Edric Show. And one of my last two questions for you is one, what are some of the main takeaways you want your readers to take away from the book? And again, having read the book, it's across. I mean, no matter what industry, you can take away quite a bit of information from this book. So, what do you want people to take away from after they read your book about microskills?
Yeah.
I think the biggest lesson we would hope is that success does not require self-sacrifice. That's important for me, for people to realize that, like, they just don't have to burn themselves down to climb to the top. We've seen it, I think, with COVID, that people have, like, blinders were removed, the lens in front of them is less cloudy, like they can kind of see a little bit more about what's going on in the workplace. And I think that might be that, like, new insight might be why burnout rates are going up. It's just that people are just more aware, like, hey, this is not sustainable. I can't believe I was doing this for so long. And so really just trying to encourage people to dial back and to really focus on themselves. We actually scaffold the book with this idea of, like, taking care of yourself is so important. And when you're doing that, you can be best positioned to take care of the team, the people who you work with. And then when the team is in a good spot, then the work is really great. And so just, like, trying to really prioritize the whole workforce in that way, we would love to see that happen.
And I'll add that I would really like people to keep us in this book in mind when they're trying to figure out something to share with someone, a gift perhaps to give for helping educate about the workplace. We start the book with 3 truths, and we actually end the book with these same 3 truths. And for most people that have ever had the experience of not belonging in the workplace, these truths speak to them. And for people that haven't had the experience, and I will share those 3 truths, and they have been in leadership or they've always been in the majority, it actually is a really generous gift for them to get better insight into how some of their team members may experience the workplace. So those 3 truths are that time is a currency and it can only be spent. You can't put it in a savings account. So this is everybody. We all should be thoughtful about how we're spending our time, with whom we're spending our time. The next, and number 2 and number 3 are related, is the world is not equal. And all of us enter the workplace with different experiences, different pedigrees, different networks, different generational wealth or no generational wealth, different assets, all these things that give you access to what we talked about with this playbook. And then finally, learning is limitless if it is accessible. And it's this accessibility. We believe these microskills create access. So again, not everybody's at the same starting line, but we really would like to level set so that we all finish in the same place.
Well, again, I want to congratulate you guys on, one, your ability to collaborate and write and produce works and articles. That's not an easy skill, micro or not. It's really not. And also just the work that you guys are doing in the clinics as well, being in the world of emergency medicine, which again, I applaud you guys for taking that on because it can be quite intense. If people want more information about the book or you guys or just getting more information about the project itself, where can they go?
We're on all the socials. We're on LinkedIn, X, Instagram. I think I have a Threads account, though I'm not active. Resa might have a Threads account too. Just type in our names, Adaira Landry, MD, Resa Lewis, MD, and you should be able to find us anywhere on those. And then we also have our own personal websites as well. So Adaira Landry, MD, Resa Lewis, MD, and you can reach out to us that way.
Yeah. And if you're interested in hearing more of the book, as Adaira said, I think we might have even broken the 80 podcast and interview mark. If at whatever podcast listening server you use, you can type in MicroSkills and you can hear about us. Adaira has a nonprofit called Writing in Color, and I have a podcast called The Visible Voices. So we'd love for you to check out some of our other work as well.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, again, I want to thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule and your book tour to talk to me here on the Edric Show. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for writing your book, MicroSkills.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. This has been another edition of the Edric Show. I am your host, Edric Jerome, as promised. Intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and ring that notification bell, and you'll get notified of interesting content each and every week. My guests have been Dr. Adaira Landry and Dr. Resa Lewis, authors of the new book, MicroSkills, Small Actions, Big Impact. Thank you again.